Welcome to the Livin'Sky Podcast, a show about raising connected, resilient kids in a world that often forgets what they need most. I'm Lena Livin'Sky, a pediatric speech-language pathologist, holistic feeding specialist, and a mom, here to help you understand your child's body, behavior, and biology in a whole new way. Each episode brings you simple, practical tools to support healthy eating, development, and family connection without the overwhelm. Thanks for listening. I'm so glad you're here. Let's dive in. Today's guest, Jessica Setnick, brings a perspective I know so many parents need. Jessica is an eating disorder expert, educator, and speaker with over 20 years of experience, helping families understand what's really going on beneath food struggles. Her work focuses on the why behind eating challenges, not just what kids eat, but how experiences, emotions, and family patterns shape our relationship with food over time. What I love about Jessica's approach is that it's grounded, compassionate, and deeply practical. She helps parents move away from fear, pressure, and self-blame and toward understanding, trust, and long-term health for both their child and themselves. She's also the creator of Healing Your Inner Eater, a framework that helps adults reflect on their own food stories so they don't unknowingly pass stress or anxiety around food to the next generation. This is a conversation for parents who want to raise healthy, resilient eaters without control, perfection, or power struggles. Jessica, welcome. So happy to have you on the show.
Thank you. Delighted to be here.
So when parents hear the term eating disorder, they often think of teenagers or adults. How common are eating disorders or disorganized eating patterns in children, especially kind of those who present as picky eaters?
Yeah. So I try not to use the words eating disorders anymore simply because they do bring that picture in your mind of what an eating disorder is, what that means, who has an eating disorder. So I just think of it as problem eating behaviors or dysfunctional eating behaviors or disruptive eating behaviors, or even more simply, do problems happen when you eat or don't eat? And so the same thing applies to kids. Do they have disruptive eating behaviors, problem eating behaviors? Or do problems happen when your kids eat or don't eat? And sometimes the problems can be with the kids, and sometimes the problems can be with the parents. So when you talk about picky eating, sometimes the kid's not having a problem with it at all, but the parent is really concerned. And so to me, that's valid as an issue to get help for. It doesn't have to fall into that very small category of eating disorders that we have in our mind.
Absolutely. That's a really good point. I never thought about it that way. That's great. So are there any early red flags parents should pay attention to that might signal something deeper than picky eating, particularly in younger kids?
I think that picky eating in younger kids is actually really normal, and we would just
Mhm.
call it food preferences,
Mhm.
right? It's only the parent anxiety that labels it picky eating. The dietitians call it selective eating, and all of us should be selective, right? We shouldn't eat nails and pennies and marbles, right? We all are selective eaters. It's just sometimes there's a mismatch between the amount and variety of food that an adult thinks that a child should have versus what a child should have. And so I just try to remind parents that kids do not need as much of a wide variety of foods to be healthy as we imagine they do. It's good for them to be exposed to a variety of foods and to learn about a variety of foods, but that includes participating in the kitchen, that includes seeing other people eat those foods. All of those things are exposures to food, and it doesn't have to actually pass their lips and be ingested for them to be healthy. And so if we think of food experiences as, yes, we want kids to experience a wide variety of food, that's different from kids needing to eat a wide variety of food. So as far as early red flags, I would say in my experience, parents are much more alert to looking for problems than sort of being a free range parent and letting kids eat what they eat. It's our responsibility as parents and as the adults and caregivers to provide the food, but we don't think of that as a skill or as a gift that we're giving. So we think, I'm not doing anything to get this kid to eat more variety. And we don't realize that actually by providing a variety, by your kids seeing you eat a variety, you are actually doing the exact things that over time will help a child to feel comfortable around a wide variety of foods. Red flags specifically, I would say, is the change. If you notice a change in your child's eating, that is a red flag. If your
Yeah.
child has sort of been consistently avoiding red foods, or if your child has been consistently eating a little bit less than you think they should eat or a little bit more than you think they should eat, that's just their normal more than likely. But the red flag would be if you notice a change, a big drop off in their eating. Now, there is a caveat to this, which is that, somewhere in the 1 to 3 range and around the 2-year-old mark, usually kids start eating less. And you think they're getting bigger and bigger. They should always be eating more. But there's a sort of a lull in the growth spurt. And so sometimes kids do eat less. But that's a change that you would observe and you might want to talk about with a professional in case it's something that's stressing you out. The biggest red flag, though, is a change that happens in relation to a stressful event. When you notice that your kids change the way they're eating after there's been some kind of stressor in the family, that is huge because changing
Mhm.
your eating related to stress is the biggest precursor of an eating disorder. The other red flag would be if someone tells you that your child needs to lose weight. Avoid that at all costs. Children do not need to lose weight. They may need to maintain their weight while they grow taller, but putting a child on any kind of restrictive eating plan usually results in weight gain. And then the last red flag is the growth chart. Looking at the growth chart and seeing if at any point the child does not continue on their same trajectory, if they sort of jump up or jump down, that would be a red flag that something is not proceeding with normalcy.
I love this perspective, though, that, not to worry so much about the label, but think about the environment because that is exactly what I also teach the parents I work with. Because I think the biggest change we can make to help our kids to be more comfortable with food is in their environment so they don't feel stressed, they don't feel scarce or forced to do anything. I think those are just so important for our kids to feel comfortable and regulate the nervous system and be able to sit down and try different foods and eat different foods. So I
Yeah.
definitely agree with that.
And what goes in your body is such a personal choice. I've seen research that shows that the same kid that says, no, I don't want to eat that is the same kid that will say, no, I won't do drugs. No, I won't have unprotected sex with you. Like it's good to have boundaries about
Yeah.
what goes in your body. But sometimes we feel like we should overrule that. And it's actually a skill that we should be respecting if we can.
And I think we're also often influenced so much by what's going on with other people in our environment. It's hard for us to kind of understand what is my normal? What is the normal
Right.
thing in my house, right? Because we're
Right.
just constantly comparing because social media
Oh my
and
gosh. When I became a stepmom, my stepkids were 5 and 6, and they had a very limited palate of what they ate. And I had the luxury of telling myself this lie, which I know is not true, but I told myself, well, if I had been in the picture from the very beginning, they would eat many more things. Nevertheless, here I am in this situation where this is the things that these kids will eat. Well, I made sure at every meal, one of those things was available, if not two of those things. I would take one of those things was Velveeta cheesy shells. And so when we would go somewhere, let's say to my mom's house for Thanksgiving, I would bring Velveeta cheesy shells and my mom didn't care. I would put it on the stove and believe me, the adults loved the Velveeta cheesy shells. It wasn't just my kids, but I would always make sure there was going to be something that they could eat. Well, there's one person in my family that would always say, can't your kids just eat whatever's being served? And I just had to be the sort of the buffer between the kids and that person. I just felt like, no, they're going to eat what they're going to eat. I want to make sure that my kids always feel comfortable that there will be something for them to eat. They're adults now, they eat everything. They needed that protection as a child from negative points of view. But it wasn't easy for me as the parent to absorb those negative points of view, right? I remember one time saying to my stepdad, Howard, Peyton wants a hot dog with no bun. Derek wants a bun with no hot dog, and this same family member kind of like scolds me again. And it's like, you know what? Maybe when you have kids, you'll understand. But I want my kids not to be ashamed of what they eat. I want them to be well nourished and I want them to be confident. I want them to have good manners. I want them to know how to put a napkin in their lap, how to have a conversation with the other people at the table. I want them to know how to order in a restaurant. These are the skills that I want to give them. And if we have to take them to college with a Costco case of Velveeta cheesy shells tied to the top of the car, that's what we're going to do. But it didn't come to that because in their own way, in their own time, they started expanding their palates maybe around 12 years old. As long as we can tolerate it, as long as they're growing appropriately, it's okay to let your kid have a narrow palette of foods that they eat. And I will tell you that when Derek was 12 years old and he started eating more things, and I told Greg, like, don't say anything about it. Don't put pressure on him. And I realized later, like, he's really changing. I asked him at a non-meal time, Derek, it's totally fine, but I'm just curious. Why have you started trying all these new foods? And he said, Jessica, I'm going to start dating soon and I do not want to order off the kids' menu. And it made me realize like it has to be his motivation to change because us sort of forcing him to try to change him is only going to make the stress at meal times much worse. And no one likes to eat under stress.
I'm a huge believer that light is one of the most powerful medicines for our kids and for us. That's why I love Bon Charge. Their blue light blocking glasses, red light therapy devices, and many other products are designed to support your circadian rhythm and help your family sleep and feel better naturally. In our modern world of screens and artificial light, these small shifts make a big difference. Calmer evenings, deep sleep, better focus, and happier moods. I use Bon Charge products every single day, and even my son has his own pair of blue light blocking glasses for evening story time. You can check out all their products at boncharge.com and use code LENAL to save 15% off your purchase. Oh, that's very true. And then that can also turn into disordered eating down the line too, right? Because of
Sure,
them hiding
hiding
around it.
food. Oh, yes, all kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah. But I like that perspective because I think as long as we have kind of healthy food within our home environment, but it's not restricted, that's the foods that they're going to be exposed to down the line as well, right?
I am so with you because kids don't have a credit card, they don't have a car, they can't buy food at the grocery store. What we bring into our home, that is completely our responsibility.
Right.
Once it's in the home, I feel like it's fair game. Now, I might personally, let's say if I didn't have a husband who likes to drink Coke, maybe there's no Coke in my house. Okay. Maybe there's no Doritos in my house. But my husband likes those things. So if those things are in my house, I can have parenting rules like we don't eat chips out of the bag, we eat chips out of a bowl, right? But if those things are in the house, I feel like I can't tell the kids you can't have that, it's only for dad, right? That's I mean, yes, I would say that if it was beer, yes, I would say that. I said that about Coke, but to say that something is bad for you and then to let dad eat it, that gives a mixed message to kids. Is daddy going to die because he's eating bad food? Right. So we have to be very careful about that. At the same time, once those chips are gone, there's no more chips until someone goes back to the store. So it's not like we have to provide those every single day. It's just simply that if it's in your house, it's really not appropriate to shame anyone for eating it. It's
Yeah.
all about those emotions that we're generating in people to help the children feel like competent eaters, like they can make good choices rather than feeling embarrassed about the things that they want to eat or scared. Scared is not good either.
Absolutely. And one of the things I always talk with my son about is about first having a savory meal or like a protein, and then we can have a sweet. So it's not like, no, we're not having dessert, or like, you can't have this, or this is our reward after eating. I always explain to him why we have to eat savory first, why we have our meat first, etc. And then I let him choose something if he chooses to have something sweet after. I just think that the way we connect with food and the messaging that we have around food is just so important to share with our kids in a way that is healthy and it's not restrictive as well.
I agree. And your kids' biggest role model is you. I mean,
Mhm.
yes, once they go to school, once they're out in the world, once they get their driver's license, once they have social media, once they watch TV, there's so many more influences on them. But the most time they spend with anyone in those earliest years is you. So
Yeah.
the way that you approach food is a lot of times the way that they're going to approach food. So if you approach food with curiosity and, ooh, I've never had this before, I'm going to try it and see if I like it. Ooh, there's some things I like about it, but I don't know if I want to eat more of it. If they see you sort of with the autonomy to make choices around food, then the ideal is that they grow up knowing they have autonomy to make choices around food too.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. So, ARFID is a term that's coming up more and more, unfortunately. Can you explain what ARFID is in a parent-friendly language and how it's different from typical picky eating or
Sure.
eating
So
disorders?
ARFID is an acronym. It stands for Avoidant Restrictive Food Intake Disorder. And I don't love this name and I don't love this diagnosis. But the reason that it was created was because there used to be a category in the diagnostic manual called childhood feeding and eating disorders. And that category is now gone. And so there was a need for some kind of criteria for children who needed feeding therapy. And so ARFID became this umbrella diagnosis for children who needed feeding therapy. I think it is applied in a lot of inappropriate ways. I think that a lot of pediatricians and primary care and family doctors use it when they are saying, sort of, maybe your child would benefit from an assessment for ARFID, but they sort of give the label of ARFID.
Mm,
And without the assessment having taken place, in other words. So it's sort of like saying, I think you have the flu without testing you for the flu, right? Which can have pluses and minuses in the case of the flu. In the case of ARFID, I think it's a big minus because truly the diagnosis applies when it is impairing a child's ability to grow and be nourished. So, picky eating, if a child is growing normally, if a child is happy, healthy, and can eat cheesy shells or whatever it is if their parent brings it along to Thanksgiving dinner. That's not ARFID because the child is growing, the child is healthy, the child is well functioning, the child has a personality, the child is doing great. ARFID applies when there are functional problems related to eating, the limited eating palate. So a child is not growing appropriately. A child has nutritional deficiencies. A child doesn't have a normal amount of energy because they're lethargic, because they're undernourished. And so we have to look at this as, is the child undernourished because they're being provided with appropriate food and they're choosing not to eat it, or for some reason they're unable to eat it? Are their tonsils too big and so they're having trouble swallowing? Like, is there a physical problem? That's not ARFID. That's something that needs to be addressed. Is there a motility problem? Do they have some kind of suck, swallow, breathe problem where it's right a functional problem? That's not ARFID. So, in other words, people get that ARFID diagnosis for their children before it's really been assessed what is actually going on. And so I object to that, not necessarily the diagnosis itself, but the way it's unfortunately used as too big of an umbrella. And it
mhm,
scares people. My child has this disorder, when your child may have that disorder, but we haven't really appropriately evaluated for it. So
mhm.
that's my first thought. I don't know. I hope that was parent friendly language as you
It
asked for.
was. I think it was. So what is that diagnosis process like typically? Does it have to be done with a psychologist, a dietitian? Who does the diagnosing?
So I would think that the best person is actually a speech language pathologist, but it could be different
Mhm,
people because what you're really trying to rule out is, again, I'll say it this way: ARFID is, you're trying to rule out everything else that it could be before you go with that diagnosis of ARFID. So you're trying to rule out, does this child have some kind of inborn error of metabolism that's making them not grow correctly? Does this child have some kind of food aversion because of they're being given food that isn't age appropriate so they can't chew it correctly, or those kind of things? Is there something in the environment that makes the child scared to go to the table and eat food, versus if all things were normal and appropriate in the environment, would this still be a child who is unable to nourish themselves well?
mhm.
So you're kind of ruling out all these things. So I think a speech language pathologist, my daughter is one. I'm a dietitian, she's a speech therapist. I think that she probably has the best skills, and maybe an occupational therapist that specifically works with feeding disorders. A dietitian can be helpful as well. And sometimes even a child therapist can have information about what's going on.
Mhm.
Maybe an ENT if someone needs to sort of investigate the digestive process and see
Right.
if everything's working correctly, maybe a gastroenterologist. It's really a team effort when it
It
comes to
is.
ARFID.
I think feeding in general, once it becomes disordered, quote unquote, I think working with a team is definitely the way to go. Um, I'm a speech pathologist as well, and we cannot actually diagnose anything. So we actually work with feeding, but we can't give a diagnosis. So what I've learned is that it will be a psychologist. So I was just wondering of like the diagnostic process
As
of
far
how
as
they
the
would do it.
diagnosis,
Right.
yes, it could
Yes.
be any kind of mental health professional. It can be a primary care doctor. I guess I'm working it backwards and thinking the doctor gives
Before.
the diagnosis of ARFID, and then the parents are actually responsible now for sort of verifying that that's what it is. Like,
Mhm.
just because you got the diagnosis from the primary care doctor, I mean, I hate to say don't trust your doctor because that's not what I mean, but what I mean is doctors really aren't educated about this new
Say the same
diagnosis.
thing.
So they may give it, and what your job is next is to say, okay, so my child's been diagnosed with not eating enough. I need to now look into what is the cause. There could be many, many possible causes of that.
Absolutely. And I agree. I think doctors, pediatricians, they mean so well, but they just
Yes.
can't wear every hat. So they don't
Yeah.
know everything about everything. And there's just so many chronic disorders happening right now just because of how toxic the world is. And our kids are just getting sicker. So that's why we often should work with an interdisciplinary
Yes.
team. And
Yes.
definitely when it comes to feeding disorders in any way or very severe picky eating, anything like that, I think you're spot on as well. SLPs, OTs, dietitians, psychologists, sometimes pediatrician, hopefully an integrated one where you can actually kind of look at the child from many different angles, as well as an ENT, a nutritionist, so many
I guess
different
what
things.
I'm really trying to hit home is that if your child gets a diagnosis of ARFID, they do not have a condition or a disease or an illness. It's just a
Mhm.
name for what you see
Yes,
as the result.
yes.
And so that's what I'm trying to say is that it's just a fancy name for your child isn't eating enough.
Yeah, true. It's true.
You still have to figure out why. It's not like, "Oh, your child has ARFID, here's a pill for that."
Right. Yeah.
It's
There
not
is
a
a
name
root
of a
cause
condition.
underneath it, or root
Right.
causes. And anxiety seems to be kind of like a big driver for a lot of kids with
Sure.
ARFID. So
Yeah.
how does anxiety around food develop in children, and what are some signs parents might miss or look for?
Well, so anxiety is anxiety, right? It
Mhm.
may develop just around food because of an event that happened with food, or it may be anxiety that a child has in general about trying new things, about different textures, about being very sensitive to stress going on in other people around them. So there's lots of ways that anxiety manifests in food, but I wouldn't say that anxiety, I guess there's two parts. Anxiety in general that also impacts food, and anxiety only at the table, only around food situations. And that's two different things to really evaluate. Is there a specific issue with food, or is this a child that has anxiety in general? And that's where I was saying sort of a child mental health professional,
Yeah.
with play therapy, toy therapy, that kind of thing, sand tray type of stuff, they can sometimes help determine if this is an anxiety issue and provide skills for parents of you have a child who innately is more anxious. We don't typically give anxiety medication to young children. So here are some skills that
Yeah.
you can use to support them and help them understand themselves and help them regulate their anxiety as opposed to scolding them, punishing them, those kind of things, which actually don't help a child grow up
Yeah.
integrated and well and having anxiety but knowing how to manage it as opposed to feeling embarrassed and not realizing this is anxiety, this is a characteristic I have, but thinking I'm bad
Yeah.
because I don't want to eat this food or something like that. So it really just depends. Social skills groups is also something good. I think that one of the issues is when kids are really, really young, you see behaviors in a vacuum. Once they start going to school and they start being with other kids, a lot of times kids' palates expand because they see another kid eating something and they're curious about it. And there's no stress in that environment to try something from another friend versus the way it may be presented at home. And I'm not blaming parents at all. I'm just saying you are an authority figure without trying to be. You may be creating a stressful environment in your home simply because your child wants to please you. So it's not anything you've done, it's just the home environment itself. And then sometimes when kids go to a friend's house, they experience something and you say, "Oh my gosh, I make that same food and my kid doesn't eat it at home." That's just simply because they're in a different environment and they're able to try it. And the anxiety threshold of disappointing you is down. And so
Mhm.
that's the kind of thing where anxiety can be a big part of this. And if our child has anxiety, we just need to help them learn how to manage it in life as opposed to thinking that we can scold it out of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what are some things you suggest that parents can do at home for those kids who do have food anxiety or these picky eating behaviors at home so they can actually create a more supportive environment for them that doesn't feel overwhelming as well? Because I think for some parents, when they hear about picky eating and changes at home and therapy, it feels like you have to redo everything and change everything in the environment. And it's absolutely not like that. It could be just a few tweaks here and there
A
that you
few
can do
tweaks,
to
yes.
feel
Okay, a few tweaks.
supportive.
One is try to involve your kid in the kitchen with you, even if that means sitting at the countertop with you while you prepare the food, even if they're not touching food or anything. But it's, at appropriate age, give them a plastic knife and let them cut up a strawberry or, something that can cut with a plastic knife that they can't hurt themselves with. Even if that strawberry ends up being like to the point you cannot actually use it. Like, it's okay. Just let them have food on their hands and touch it and, that kind of thing if they're willing. Keep them involved in what should we have for dinner tonight? Take them to the grocery store. I know it takes 50 times longer at the grocery store when you have a kid with you, but if you can plan appropriately to have that time, think of it as an excursion with your child instead of like, I just want to get in and out at the grocery store, and let them just see the foods and talk to them about the foods. Any kind of exposure like that is a first tweak where food is not in a eating environment. Food is just in a preparing or observing environment. That's a really good thing to start with. Another thing is tiny, tiny portions. Kids are small. If you put your two fists together, that's about the size of your stomach. Think of a kid's little two hands, right? That's their whole stomach. That's everything that can fit in their stomach, their milk, everything. So when you put a portion on their plate of something, think tiny, tiny, tiny. Think like 3 macaroni noodles. It sounds ridiculous, but there's more. They can always have more, but it can be overwhelming just to see a
Yeah.
big amount on a plate for a kid. So tiny, tiny portions. Having the food out on the table, if you're used to keeping the food in the kitchen and only bringing the plates to the table, I wonder if you would consider putting the food on the table so that the child can see there is more if I want more. And so it's sort of not a feeling of desperation or restriction. It's a feeling of abundance. It doesn't mean the kid is going to eat all that food. It's just a mental state. And I know that there are people listening who are like, oh, I wish we barely do have enough food. And I hate that, when I was a kid, my parents said you have to eat your food because there's children starving in China, and everyone had a different country, right? But their parents told them something. And I think now, my God, you didn't have to go to China. You could have gone across the street. There were kids that didn't have enough food to eat. And I think that is one of the most shameful things about a modern nation, that there's children that don't have enough to eat. So I guess my advice is really going to someone who does have enough to eat. If you don't have enough to eat, we have sort of a whole different issue we have to deal with.
Right.
But if you can bring that food to the table so the child can see, yeah, I only got 3 macaroni noodles, but that's just my start bite. That's just my taste bite. And if I want more, I get to have more and I get to pick what I'd like to have more of. I do think also that making sure there is always something on the table that your kid likes to eat. If you tell me my kid only eats bread rolls, then I say bread rolls at every meal. And you say, well, that can't be healthy. And I say, what's healthy is your child knowing there is something they like to eat on that table every single time. And if they only fruit they like to eat is tangerines, tangerines on the table every single time. I don't care if they eat it or don't eat it. It's building the idea in them that I will always get fed. I will always be okay. I will always be safe. The table is a safe place for me.
Hmm.
And to me, those are really probably the key. I may think of a few others, but those are the key. Involving your kids with food, letting them see that there's enough food, and always having something that is sort of a safe, enjoyable food for them. Always having that at a meal.
Absolutely. It creates such a safe environment, like you said, and sends the right message to the child and gives them a sense of control. That's why I always talk about as well having kind of like a tapas style dinner so they can choose what goes on their plate. And you can encourage them in a very loving way, but no forcing, like you're going to have this and this and this. They can control how many noodles, right? Maybe it's 3 macaroni noodles, maybe it's one, maybe it's a half, because that's all they can handle right now. And that's okay too. So I
It is
really love that
okay.
advice.
And I'm glad you said that. That brings up one other thing. It's not okay for a child's anxiety to say, I don't want anyone to eat pizza, or I don't want that near me, right? It's like, if it's not on your plate, if someone else is eating it, that has to be okay. And so if a child's anxiety is so high that they can't even look at a food or can't even be in the same room with a food, that's really an important time to get professional intervention, because that says that that child's anxiety, I'm not saying that it's not real. They may really feel that, but the question is really, how can I help you navigate your own internal experience? Because it's not okay for no one in the family to be able to eat this
Right.
food because you don't feel comfortable with how it looks or how it smells.
And if the sensory processing issues are so high, also, I think professional help is definitely warranted because we have to look at nutritional deficiencies and what's really
Yes.
going on in their
I
body.
totally agree with that. And, I will say on the other side, also just a caveat, right? So, for example, I remember when Peyton had braces, she couldn't eat popcorn. And so she said, "Nobody eat popcorn at the movies because I'll feel like I'm missing out." You know what? That was an accommodation we could make. It was no big deal. When she wasn't around, we ate as much popcorn as we wanted at the movies. But if she was at the movies with us, we didn't eat popcorn. And so I'm not saying that everything is a hard and fast rule. I'm saying
Mhm.
evaluate how it will impact your family. And if someone's saying, "I can't stand the smell of Brussels sprouts," okay, maybe you don't cook Brussels sprouts and the aroma fills the whole kitchen. If it's just one food, maybe it's not a big deal. You have to evaluate how that fits into your family. So I don't want to make it sound like everybody has to be comfortable with every food. There
Yeah.
are reasons that you, in the context of your family, may make a decision.
There's always so much nuance to what we try to
Yes.
say because we won't apply to every child in every
Right.
situation.
Right, right, right.
But it's just kind of like a teaching thing for you to be more aware of your family and their needs, I think, too, because sometimes when we zoom out and we just focus on the connection and to see what are the patterns, we can kind of bring in the appropriate changes that are really going to help your child feel a little bit more nurtured in their environment.
Well, and something you just said is it's hard to zoom out when it's your own family,
Yeah.
right? And I'm a PD dietitian and I still made mistakes in my own family, right? So having another pair of eyes, like a professional, look in and give you advice is really good. There is a part that is ego, and it's like, ugh, so you're giving me a correction that means I'm a terrible parent. And we have to sort of take care of ourselves and say, okay, hang on. You're a really good parent who maybe wants to do something differently. And hopefully the professional has a way of expressing that you don't feel like you've been sort of scolded. But we can add that. Even if the professional is as kind as they can be, you can still feel scolded. I mean, I used to tell parents all the time, your job in your mind is to feed, clothe, and shelter your child. And when one third of that is not going right, is really easy to blame yourself. And it's not, to me, it's like there's nothing wrong with the child, there's nothing wrong with the parent, but something about the interaction is a
Exactly.
problem. But you can keep your feeling of, I am a good parent, I'm a caring parent. And again, what parents often needed to hear was, you don't realize how many things you are doing right because you don't even think of them as a thing. The fact that you have food in your home to feed your kid, you don't even think of that as a thing. That's like such a no brainer to you, but you don't realize that is a really good, important thing that you're doing. The fact that you sit down to meals with your kid, like you don't think of even that as like, wow, that's really big. The fact that you're not on your phone all the time in a meal time, like these are really important things that you're just like, but isn't that what everybody does? No, that isn't what everybody does. And so I think it's also a part on the professional to make sure that we don't come across as scolding and blaming, but also for the parent to express themselves. If you feel like a professional is scolding you, if you feel ashamed internally, just say that out loud so that the professional can reassure you and say, "Oh, no, 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 no. No, 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 no. This happens every single day." And so you kind of stop seeing it. And it's easy, simple, easy peasy for an outside person to look at it and see it. It doesn't mean you were missing something. It's simply because an outside view can see things differently.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so much emotions happening at the home, right? Because when you are trying to work with your own child or make changes at home, there's a lot of emotions involved. Sometimes we're tired, sometimes we're overwhelmed, sometimes we're rushing, sometimes we're unhappy, sometimes we're perfectly prepared to do it. But this is a situation we have to work on with every single day. And I'm a feeding specialist and I have a picky eater at home. And sometimes I get frustrated and sometimes I yell and sometimes I feel awful about it because I should know better. But that's just being a mom. and that's okay. And something that I love about what you said is that, as mothers and parents in general, we have an intuition when it comes to our children. And if you feel like something's off or something is not clicking with the professional you're working with, you're your child's biggest advocate. You are your own biggest advocate, and you can always make a change. Don't worry about hurting anybody's feelings. This is about you and your family, and it's okay to be that mama bear and really getting what you need for you and your
I
family.
agree with that. I agree with second opinions. I agree with it's not a good personality match. You could have the smartest counselor in the world, but if they're always running late, let's say, you know what I mean? There's lots of reasons why you could say this just isn't a good match. I'm going to try someone else. Absolutely.
Definitely.
I used to think like, if I go see someone else, am I doctor shopping? Like, I don't know where I got that term doctor shopping, but thinking that that was a bad thing. It's like going to find the person who's going to tell you what you already want to hear. And it took a counselor to say to me, going to get a second opinion is not doctor shopping.
I love that. These days when your child refuses everything you make and you just want them to have something nourishing, that's when I grab Signals. It's a real food meal replacement shake made with organ meats, minerals, and nutrients that support kids' biology, not just fill them up. It's rich in iron, zinc, and B vitamins, the building blocks for growth, focus, and strong immune systems. And it's great for the gut. And the best part? Nate calls it his ice cream shake. That's how delicious it is. And as a mom, it feels amazing to know he's getting what his body truly needs without the fight. You can learn more at feedyoursignals.com, and don't forget to use Lena10 at checkout for 10% off your purchase. Yeah, because it's really not. We have this innate knowledge in our gut to understand like who we want to be with, who we feel safe with, and it's totally okay to follow that emotion.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Because I also think if you are working with somebody you don't trust, you're probably not going to apply the advice they're giving you very well. So it's kind of a waste of time.
Such a good point.
So from your experience, what role do adults' own food histories play in how feeding challenges show up in children?
Huge, 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 enormous. And the best example I can give you is my very first patient who maybe would have been diagnosed with ARFID, except it wasn't a diagnosis back then. So this is 1998. This patient was sent to me by their counselor because the main complaint of the parents was that the child was a picky eater. So here I am, ready to write down what are the 5 foods that they eat because they say there's only 5 foods. And so I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm writing and I'm like, wait, this is way more than 5 foods. What is going on here? And so I'm asking more questions and I find out that every day at 2:00, the child says, what am I going to have to eat tonight? What am I going to have to eat tonight? He's expressing this anxiety about what he's going to have to eat tonight. So I'm getting more information. What is the worry? Like I'm hearing this parents say, we're so worried our child is a picky eater. And I'm thinking every evidence here is to the contrary, right? I'm looking at the kid. He's like a golden child, I'm looking at his growth chart. I'm listening to the number of foods that he does like to eat. So where is this idea that he's a picky eater coming from? Well, it turns out that the dad's sister is an incredibly picky eater as an adult. This is the story I'm hearing. She only eats ham and cheese sandwiches, to the point that she brings ham and cheese sandwiches to Thanksgiving dinner. She brings ham and cheese sandwiches to restaurants. She only eats ham and cheese sandwiches. And the reason she's such a picky eater is because no one made her eat anything when she was a kid. So now they make this kid eat something new at dinner every single night so he doesn't turn out like the aunt. So here's my intervention. Number 1, I said, I think it's really important that your kid hear me say right now, he should not be forced to eat another single thing ever. Done. Over. No more forcing to eat at dinner. He's going to eat the things that he eats. He has plenty of options. You're doing fine. The second thing is, could someone volunteer here to please ask whoever might know what really happened with this aunt? Could you please get some more information? I'm very that this story is not as it's being told.
Mm-hmm.
They never came to see me again for a good reason. The mom calls later that week, cancels the follow-up appointment, says, we're already better. We were at the grocery store together, and my son said, can we try these popsicles? And he has never once in his life volunteered to try a new food. So I bought the popsicles. He tried one. He didn't like it, but I do not care because you cracked the code, basically.
Mm-hmm.
She says, second thing I have to tell you, I asked my mother-in-law, what is the story with this aunt? How did she get to be this way? And the mother-in-law says, well, when she was little, she was a really picky eater. And we were told by the pediatrician to force her to eat things. And that's why she is an adult and she swore she will never be forced to eat anything again.
God.
And that's why she's such a picky eater. And it was like, oh my gosh, this is the story, is that we have this worry for our child that's based on something either we experienced or something, some lore in the family, right? Or an experience we had as kids. And now we are either replaying it or we're doing 180 degrees the opposite, which is also not responsive to the child. And so that's where I felt, I mean, I'm telling you, that was my first patient. It was like, this set the stage for my entire career as a dietitian.
Wow.
That it's not, you are not looking at just the child. You are looking at generations back. The way that the parents were raised with food is influencing the way the child is being raised with food, the way the grandparents were raised with food. And here's the important thing. It is 2026. There is no one alive that isn't descended, grandparent, great-grandparent, parent, from someone who lived through the Great Depression, who lived through a refugee situation, who lived through food insecurity, poverty, rationing in World War II. There is no one alive who is not descended from someone who at some point did not have enough to eat. And they taught us these lessons. You have to eat everything on your plate. There's children starving in blank country. And any child knows, how is me eating this food going to help the children in China? Like, what? That doesn't even make sense. But we repeat this stuff because it's ingrained in us. And so in order to change it, sometimes we have to look back and say, what am I doing to perpetuate these things that maybe are no longer needed? And I'm not saying that our parents were wrong when they told us these things. They were doing what they did out of love. Granted, there are abusive parents. That is not what I'm referring to. I think that most of our parents that told us things about food were doing it out of love.
Yes.
But it's sort of like if they taught us how to, I'm trying to think of something. If they taught us how to saddle up a horse to go to school, and it's like, no, we drive a car to school now, right? We don't need that skill anymore. Like, how do we let go of it without feeling like we're betraying our ancestors who sacrificed to get us to this point? And that's a lot of therapy for us as the adults. Yes, that's what we do in Healing Your Inner Eater, is try to sort of uncover what are those maybe unconscious messages that you are still conveying. And even if you don't have kids, it applies, right? Because we're still doing it to ourselves.
And so many of us are doing it subconsciously. Like, we don't even realize it. So how do we figure it out?
So here's the first exercise that we do in Healing Your Inner Eater. We ask people to, we have a handout and it shows a circle in the middle with many circles around it. We say, put me in the circle, or your name, the middle circle. And then in those circles around it, write the names of the people who were influential, adults who were influential in your childhood, maybe another kid, if there was another kid that was really influential in your childhood, a babysitter, whatever, but put any, it can be caregivers, it could be someone who lived in your house, someone who didn't live in your house, it could be your favorite aunt, it could be your kindergarten teacher, who those influential adults. And then we ask you to write around each circle a little bit about what you know about the life of each of those adults. We're not even talking about food yet, because when you try to talk directly about food, we become sort of defended and we think in a very intellectual way. This is more like, think about the environment that you were being raised in. And then we ask everyone to have a group discussion and think about, what do you think the influences related to food were of all of these people and all of their experiences? And people will then come up with really amazing recollections, and they'll say, I didn't even remember this, or I remembered it, but didn't occur to me. It was still affecting me. And that's how, by not trying to think about food first, by trying to just put yourself in the shoes of you as a child and the experiences you had, all kinds of things start to bubble up. I'm thinking of one woman who said, I remembered that my grandmother used to cry at every big family meal. And I would ask my grandpa, why is grandma crying? And he would say, those are happy tears. And she said, only as an adult did I find out that my grandmother grew up in the Dust Bowl and they did not have enough food. And every Sunday they would have a big family meal. They would invite the minister over, but the children were told you cannot eat anything until the minister and all the adults are finished because they didn't want the minister to know they didn't have enough food. And so they would watch the minister just like enjoying the food and then knowing that if nothing was left, there was going to be nothing for them
Oh my
afterwards.
gosh.
And so for this grandmother to sit at a big family meal where everyone has enough to eat, including the grandchildren, she's like weeping with happiness. So things like that you don't think of as influencing you, it's important to just sort of get that information. And then once you've got the information, then you can start to think about, how did this influence me? Does this affect the way I eat now? And that's the part that is unconscious. So it's sort of like we drum everything up and then we say, no, look at those experiences that you had as a child. Are any of them still affecting you to this day?
Yeah.
Because most people will say that happened so long ago, it's not affecting me anymore. And our answer to that is the longer ago it happened, the more it influenced you because the younger you were when it happened, the less resources and skills you had to explain it, the more childish the narrative that you wrote around that, right? It's like, oh my gosh, no, the longer ago it happened, the more it probably is affecting you. And yet people don't think about it until we really try to put them in that environment that they were in as a child.
Oh my gosh, that just gave me chills because it is so true. You're right. Everybody kind of descended from something really scarce in a way because my parents, we're from Poland originally. So World War II and World War I, everything, affected the upbringing because the messaging we hear from our great grandparents and grandparents and parents, it is oftentimes the same because most of our parents didn't have the opportunity to do that inner healing that we have now because of the lifestyle we have and the information we have at our hands and disposal. So a lot of us are here able to break the cycle.
Yes. And it's so important to not feel like you're betraying them. I was
Yes.
sort of referring to that before, is that feeling of my ancestors sacrificed and suffered so I could get here. I have such an easy life. I'm an embarrassment to them. Instead, think this is why they sacrificed and suffered so that you could have a safe life, so that you would have enough food. You are the living embodiment of why they made those sacrifices.
Yes.
So revel in that and know that they're celebrating with you, not shaming you.
Wow. I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but in the
Definitely.
interest of time, I have one question I like to ask every guest.
Yes.
If you could offer one piece of wisdom to parents who want to raise just healthier, more resilient children in today's world, what would it be?
Oh my gosh. It would be to remember that they are their own individual beings. And it's so hard to remember because we want to sort of give them all the lessons that we've learned and just so they don't have to learn things the hard way, but they have to learn things the hard way. Please let them be their individual beings. Give them safety to make mistakes, but don't try to make their life perfect because it's not possible.
It's true. That's very true. Thank you so much, Jessica. If anybody wanted to find you online, where can they find you?
Yes. So my umbrella website is jessicasetnick.com. That's where people can find my courses for health professionals, invite me to be a speaker somewhere. If you're specifically interested in the Healing Your Inner Eater workshop and workbook, the healingyourinnereater.com is where you can find out where my next workshops will be. You can get the Healing Your Inner Eater workbook, and I'll make a discount code podcast for any listeners. If they use podcast, it'll bring the price of the workbook down to $15. So they can have it. It's an ebook that you can print at home on demand.
Amazing. Thank you. I think it's so worth it for all of us to actually get it and go through it because there are things we are not even thinking about, right? And things are probably going to come up. Thank you so much, Jessica. This was such a lovely conversation.
Agreed. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to the Livin'Sky Podcast. If this episode resonated, please leave a quick 5-star review or share it with another parent who'd love it too. It really helps more families find the support that they need. And don't forget to join my newsletter at linalivinsky.com for more tips and free guides. Sending a little sunshine to your kitchen today. See you next time.